Practices that are analogous to modern male medical circumcision go back for thousands of years. Of course, we know about the practices of the ancient Hebrews. We can read about that in the Old Testament. This is very familiar to us. But similar practices were also done in ancient Egypt, though on a much smaller scale, because it seems that for them, circumcision was reserved for certain men who were performing particular religious duties, perhaps. We also know that the practice has been performed in the Muslim world. It's been performed among various African tribes and on the Australian continent. But what we know as modern medical male circumcision begins in the 19th century, during the Victorian period. And the emergence of this procedure, which in some parts of the world, namely in certain parts of the Anglophone world, has been established as a norm. The emergence of this procedure is connected with what Michel Foucault calls biopower. And this idea means simply that by this point in history, the various forms of modern institutional power that were qualitatively new, scientific-based power, medicine, psychiatry, the biological sciences, statistical endeavors of various sorts, demography, which these things were used by the state and by other actors who were able to establish themselves as authoritative. These technologies and strategies of power were applied in a more and more pervasive way to the human body, controlling everything from its appearance to its functions, to its sensations, to the desires that were associated with it. This new form of power, Foucault would say, is more pervasive than the previous one that ruled in the Christian epoch. Of course, Christianity has continued and is still influential, but it's not the church is not the dominant institution of society as it was during the Middle Ages. But what we do see is that many of the preoccupations of Christianity, many of its attitudes about the body, about sexuality, about gender, about what was normal, right, natural, were carried over into this new scientific worldview, not without alteration, mind you, but it was transmitted in very significant ways. And we see this in the preoccupations of scientific and medical men, and they were mostly men of the late 19th century, who were, as Foucault said, interested in controlling women's bodies, getting a grip on children's sexuality, which was increasingly an area of concern. They were concerned with managing the so-called racial stock. And all of this was tied in with new theories about why people are the way they are, essentially. Eugenics was coming to prominence during this time. There were theories about what was called degenerescence. This was the idea that sexual perversions, which they were very interested in controlling, including masturbation, could degenerate the body and cause one to have inferior offspring, which would mean that your children, the children of sexual perverts, would be a drain on society because they're less intelligent. They're also perverted. They're going to be part of a constant underclass, and they're going to have children who are like them, or even worse, so forth and so on. So you have this snowball effect of a degenerating populace, and so it became very important to the medical men of the day to prevent masturbation, or at least to control it, especially among children and adolescents. So, and before I move on, I wanted to reemphasize the fact that that this preoccupation with masturbation and degenerescence was definitely part of an overall racist ideology, and to the extent that it was associated with eugenics and these ideas uh, about how some human beings are innately, in other words, biologically inferior, which was a new idea at the time. The biological notion of race was a new notion. Previous definitions had been cultural in their orientation, for the most part. So anyway, certain medical men and scientists tried to devise ways to keep children from masturbating, and some of them were more radical than others. They created devices that could be applied to the genitals that would supposedly prevent the child from reaching their genitals with their hands. They taught techniques of punishment. Some were inspired by the practice of circumcision, which they knew to be practiced among the Jews. And at the time, the reasons given for the benefits of circumcision were very explicitly puritanical. It wasn't this. The discourse wasn't concerned primarily with hygiene as it is today, which is utter nonsense anyway. But they were very explicit that they thought circumcision was a good idea because it would theoretically reduce masturbation by making it less enjoyable and more difficult to accomplish. And those things are both certainly true. It was understood at the time that the procedure would have a deleterious effect on the sexual function, which, it seems obvious to me now because it's not exactly rocket science. If you remove, especially in a traumatic way, healthy tissues from the genitals, we can expect for there to be some permanent implications for sexual function, aesthetics, sensation. Now, that's not widely recognized today, unfortunately, but at the time it was very much bluntly, it was very bluntly stated. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, who is known as the inventor of cornflakes, was one of the most rabid proponents of circumcision, aka male genital mutilation, and you can read his writings where he very explicitly says that that the procedure should be performed on problem boys in as painful a way as possible, in other words, without anesthesia, so as to negatively imprint them, so they will have negative associations in regard to their body and in regard to sex. For girls who masturbated, he recommended the total destruction of the clitoris using carbolic acid, which he said was highly effective. So we can see that the reasons for this, for the beginning of this procedure in the late 19th century, which have been mostly forgotten today, were explicitly to reduce sensation and to impair sexual function. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history after that.